Hello and welcome, guys. Thank you so much for tuning back into us. You are here with the two Charlottes, and today we want to spill the tea on spirituality. So I'm just going to start by asking you, Charlotte, what has led you on your spiritual journey and your spiritual belief system? What is that to you?
Okie dokie. That's such a great question. I'm so glad that we're getting a chance to actually record this topic as a podcast because I think for both of us this is a huge part of our kind of daily life now. And yeah, so I'm really quite excited to talk about it. I'm gonna just prefix it with I'm sorry that I sound silly. I'm still getting over my cold, but it's fine. We're gonna work with it. Um so my kind of spiritual journey. So I didn't ever, so like kind of starting all the way back, we never really were religious or spiritual as a child. I went to, the C of E primary schools. We did Christingles at Christmas, but we weren't religious as a family. We didn't kind of go to church or practice anything. So I never really had a like that kind of an upbringing. This was definitely like spirituality for me was definitely something that came later in life, I think.
Mm,
It wasn't something I ever really knew about. There wasn't really anyone in my family that were of that kind of way of thinking. Um,
mm,
so for me, I first found spirituality was probably a couple of years into my recovery with drug addiction and mental health. So I would have been in my kind of early 20s at this point. And I can't really pinpoint exactly what started it for me. Like I had a really, really good support worker at the time, and she was heavily religious and still is heavily religious and still keeps saying to me the best self-help book I can read is the Bible. Um, but so it was very much like, she would always say, we'll pray for you and this, that, and the other. And I never really kind of paid any that much attention to it, but just somewhere along the lines, I kind of stumbled into the idea of you can heal yourself in, working like on yourself. You can heal yourself by working on yourself. Um, but this was a couple of years into, my recovery at this point, and I was still very much in the headspace of, very negative and comparing myself to everyone else and being very much in like an ego state of negativity and lack and comparison. So it didn't really stick, to be honest. Like you try
yeah, so you're very
meditating.
much in a self-healing journey.
Yeah, I was like, there was a lot of healing that had to be done. And to be honest, I'll hold my hands up. There's still a lot of healing that has to be done. I don't think we ever like fully heal from everything. But yeah, at that point, there was a lot to be done. But I started with meditation and like mindfulness. That was something that my mental health kind of team were very hot on, is taking time for, self-care and mindfulness and just being present with yourself and your emotions and how you were feeling. And like at the time, probably didn't take any of it in and thought it was a little bit of like mumbo jumbo.
A little bit of woo-woo.
A little bit of woo woo. But after a while, and this is why I'm trying to kind of pinpoint an exact time when it really switched, and I can't exactly pinpoint it, but once I started meditating and it became a consistent practice, it definitely became something that shifted for me big time. Um, and then
Do you think, sorry now to interrupt
mm,
you, but do you think the shift happened because through the meditation you connected to something
I think
that
so.
made the shift, or do you think it was just a natural shift that would have happened regardless? I mean,
I think, if I really sit and kind of analyze it, I think you are probably right in the sense that the more you meditate, the more you connect with yourself and you connect with all the different parts of who you are. And you
yeah,
really like open yourself up to that kind of thing and you like surrender over to whatever higher power you believe in. I think the more you
yeah,
do that more consistently, the stronger the connection becomes, and then the shifts start happening unconsciously. Because,
Yeah.
now I can, like, I kind of off topic slightly, but on topic, but now I can like sit and meditate and connect with spirit guides like instantly, like it near enough happens like straight away. I can get into
Yeah.
that zone and ask what I need to ask, and then I can feel it. Like I'm
Yeah.
immediately feel that presence and that connection, whereas obviously that comes over a long period of time. And I do
Yeah.
think, yeah, the more
Absolutely.
and more I was doing it, the more little shifts were happening and the bigger the connection was becoming.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think the biggest then shift that happened after that was I read The Secret, which
Yeah. Brilliant.
for anyone that is listening that hasn't read The Secret, I strongly recommend you do. It will change your life. Like
Yeah.
it was that for me, The Secret and learning about the law of attraction absolutely hands down changed my life. And then I met my mother-in-law, and she is very, very spiritual, and she would read my tarot, and we would talk about spirituality and crystals and healing and all of that kind of stuff, and it just blew my mind. And
So, had you, up until the point when you met your mother-in-law, it had only really been like meditation and working on yourself through your mental health team and like a medical professional sort of sense, would it be?
yeah, yeah,
And
to a
then,
certain extent, I started, a lot of it was meditation. That was a really big thing, and
yeah,
that's something I still do to this day. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, it was definitely more of that, and then starting to kind of look into other aspects, and then
yeah,
it kind of all started to fall into place. And this is where I'm like, this
yeah,
is where the universe then gives you this huge shove in the right direction, because I learned about The Secret, I learned about law of attraction, I learned about mindset and positive thoughts, and then all of a sudden I get really close with my mother-in-law, and this is what we start talking about, and that's the path it goes on.
the
So
universe will put someone in your path to kind of be a bit of a, would you feel like she was maybe a bit of a guide for you to help you more on that path?
I think so, yeah, definitely. Like definitely, she
Interesting.
definitely helped massively in getting
Mm.
me more onto that path. And
And
she
showing
bought
you
me my
different ways.
first, yeah, like she bought my first set of tarot cards, and she was the first person to read my tarot and actually get it right.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people that think they can read it and they can't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so that was definitely like the the big shift. And then ever since then, it's just gone from strength to strength. I've looked into different sides of spirituality and how different things can work with different healing. And I use a lot of my spirituality is all about healing, all about like healing trauma, healing past
Yeah.
lives, healing, through my recovery, keeping my mental health stable. And I owe a lot of my stability to my daily spiritual practices, even though I'm
Yeah.
medicated. Like, I will just throw that out there. I am fully medicated for my mental health. But
Yeah.
everybody that suffers will know that medication doesn't always do
I
it. You
was
have to
just
put in a
say
lot
that
of
like
work.
meditation is something that can help you, but really a lot of the work has to be done by you.
Mm,
You can't just take a medication for your mental health and think that's turned the light switch on and it's going to
yeah,
change it.
it's
It's
not
a
a fix.
constant journey, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can't just take the pill, and it's not like a magic medication that all of a sudden is going to stop the chemical imbalances in your brain and stop the
Yeah.
anxiety and stop all of that. But I just wanted to make sure that people were aware, like I do have that as an additional help. But
Yeah.
yeah, for me, it's definitely,
So it's
you
almost like a holistic way for you of looking at it. Like you are using medication to help with what needs to be, what you need the medication for, but you're also looking much more holistically and doing what needs to be done yourself in your inner work as
yes.
well.
Yeah,
And so
100%.
your spirituality has really come from a place of healing.
I would say so. I would say, and I think it's, that was what was needed. I needed to go on that down that path to
Yeah.
be able to uncover, who I am now, which, yeah, I've still got a lot of healing to do in various areas, but I'm definitely a way better version of myself now than I was when I started this journey back
Yeah,
in
that's
like
growth.
2009.
That's really, really good. Like that just shows how you're progressing. You're not just taking medication and hoping that sorts you out. You actually are. So your spiritual journey is definitely a journey of healing and self-discovery and growing from, the place that you were in and I suppose stepping into yourself
Yeah,
more
I
fully.
would agree. Yeah, definitely. Stepping into myself and, facing up to a lot of the things that happened and healing those parts. And like I've started looking into, I think I was talking to you about it the other day, this IFS therapy.
Yeah.
It's something that's
Yeah.
really like it's really popular over in the States. It's not so much something we do over here, but it's all about healing the child parts of you and reparenting yourself and
Yeah.
like reparenting the small child that experienced trauma or the teenager that felt abandoned and all of that kind of stuff, like, but it's all about doing it from like by yourself and for yourself. And that was something I was like, yes, I really need to look into that, because that is exactly what I've been doing throughout my kind of spiritual journey without really realizing it. That's kind of what I've been trying to do.
Yeah,
So,
that's really interesting. And very beneficial as well, I think. Especially, from, I mean, I'm not just generalizing parenting here, but from a place of looking at it as well from a parental position, that you can use, it's like breaking the circle, isn't it?
yeah.
You can use what you went through and the growth that you've had and the direction that your kind of spiritual journey has taken you in and what you're learning now to break that circle so that you can, help your children.
Yeah, and to make
Oh,
sure
Jenny.
that they don't then have to be 34 years old and having to heal their 13-year-old self.
Yeah,
I'm trying
yeah,
to break the cycle so that, like, and
yeah,
God forbid, like, I hope that, the girls don't ever kind of go through the stuff that I had to. A lot of it was out of a lot of people's control, but, you know, I,
same.
I want to kind of break those patterns. And I think if I break the patterns with myself, then you can reflect it onto your children.
And that just, that makes me feel so positive about the next generation growing through. And there's people like you, like myself, and many other people that we know that are on these kind of
Mm.
journeys of self-discovery and spiritual journeys, and what that means to them and how we evolve as a race, I
Yeah, no,
think.
I agree. And I think, if the more and more parents like us will be breeding parents like us that will breed parents like us. And it just,
Yeah,
it filters down. And that's why I found this IFS thing to be so fascinating. And I think it's definitely something that the UK could really benefit from. It is a very spiritual practice because you do it in a meditative, is that right?
meditative.
Meditative
Not even
state.
going to attempt to say that.
No, that's it. I'm going with it. Meditative. You do it in that kind of state, so it is more of a spiritual practice than a like medical one. But
Yeah,
I think it's definitely something a lot of people can benefit from, and it's something I'm really looking into to try and do for myself.
that's really, really good. And to be able to pass on then and give advice and tips to anyone that might need that little bit of guidance and that little bit of help as well. I do really feel that as a part of the spiritual journey for me is being a like pillar of light to be
Mm.
able to not through declaring myself as any kind of master or anything at all because I'm just human as well on this journey, but if I've learned something or if I'm able to show someone something that has benefited me in some way on my journey, you can bet your bottom dollar, or whatever the saying is, that I'm going to
Yeah.
show that and share it onto other people and try and be that little beacon of hope and light for someone else as well. Because, you know, sometimes when you're in a really dark place, you do need someone to shine a bit of a light for you, not
Yeah.
always capable of shining that light ourselves. So like for you, you had your I don't know what you would call it, your mental health helper. I don't know what you call them, like a
Well,
nurse.
I had and I don't know, she may well listen to this podcast, but I had a lady called Jo who I still speak to now, and she was 100% my guardian angel. She is my, like, the lady that keeps telling me you need to read the Bible every time I ask for some
Yeah,
self-help books. But yeah, she was 100% my guardian angel. And I know that this is a topic we're going to talk about in later podcasts, but I can 100% hand on heart tell you, if she didn't turn up at my door when she did, I would not be sat here having this podcast with you right now. Like, that was
yeah,
just possible. Like, but now that I know how the universe works and how spirit works, I know the universe brought her to me. I know
yeah,
that the reason that she was given to me as a support worker at that point was 100% part of the plan.
yeah,
It couldn't have been anybody else, because nobody else got through. So
yeah.
to be her.
Was absolutely the right person at the right time to be there. She was your light.
100%. And I'm hoping that this podcast can be that for someone else.
Oh, that would be amazing, if even if it's just for one person.
And literally.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the in a nutshell of how I got into spirituality. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of
I would love to. And I suppose I want to start off, first of all, by saying, for me, when I talk about a spiritual belief, my belief, I wouldn't say I'm religious at all, but I would call myself spiritual. And what spiritual means to me is that I am always working on myself as a person, that I am trying to be the best version of myself every single day, whether that's emotionally, mentally, physically. I try and work on, I call it holistically. So I mean like all the layers of myself, my physical layer, my spiritual, my essence, my emotional, and my mental outlook on things. So every day I'm trying to, I suppose, lift myself to a better place. And, you know, that for me means living with ethics and morals and having respect and love for myself. And that's something that has taken me a long time to develop, that love for myself. I spent a lot of years very insecure, struggling, you know, with learning how to love myself, because I didn't feel that I was worthy of love from anyone else. So I suppose my spiritual journey did start at a young age. I grew up the same as you. I went to Church of England school. I went to a COV primary school, but my parents weren't religious. We didn't practice prayer. We didn't, you know, I mean, at school we had to give thanks for the food that we ate before we ate it and things like that. So I suppose in a way there was always that kind of spiritual background to my life. Obviously, with school, we had to go to church. We had to, you know, be part of like the harvest celebrations and things like that we did growing up, and we had to sing hymns in the morning. So the idea of, I suppose, like a higher presence was always around me, but we weren't a religious family at all. Um, so I didn't grow up with that kind of background really. But I was very, very interested from a young age, from about 12 years on. I was really interested in exercise. Always as a kid, I had tons of energy. I had to be doing something. Movement was really important to me. And I found yoga. And I don't even know how I found it, but I have a book now to this day here in my drawer, which I still refer to, which is one of the first books of any kind of spiritual practice that I ever brought. And it is a book on yoga. And I brought it when I was about 12 years old. And yeah, it's the one of the longest running books that I've had. In fact, the only other book I've had that has stayed with me all that time and lasted all these years is my school leaving book. And the two books that I've managed to carry with me through all the different places I've lived, which is another a story for another day altogether, because I've lived in some crazy places.
Yes, you have.
But yoga. So I got this book on yoga, and I learned about breathing, movement and breathing. So for me, it was a bit like meditation. Obviously, yoga is a bit like a moving meditation. You're focusing on your breathing and movement at the same time. And that really interested me. And my parents used to say to me, "You were born in the wrong part of the world. You should have been born in some Eastern country somewhere where they do all that kind of, sorry now, but I am going to swear, where they do all that kind of shit. That's where you should come from." Right? That's what my parents used to say to me. And I just had this real kind of draw, like calling or draw to this, like yoga, the breathing, and then Buddhism and meditation. So I always had this like massive interest in that. And then when I left home, which again is a story for another day, I lived on a New Age travelers site for quite a while. And I was not having a good time of things. You know, I felt very isolated. I felt very alone. I was very young. I was in a very violent relationship, and there was like so much abuse and drugs and alcohol and just a horrible time of my life. And I met a woman who turned up on the traveler's site one day. Obviously, people are coming and going all the time, and she just was so nice. She was one of the nicest people that I've met, and her name was Moss. I know what her real name was, but I'm not going to say that just in case she does happen to listen to this. She did not like to be known by her real name. She called herself Moss, and she was a lovely, lovely lady, and she gave me some healing and talked to me a lot about something called Reiki, which is like two separate words. Rei means universal and Ki means life force energy. So I was learning from about the age of 14, 15 years old that you could use this energy that was, it was hands-on healing, right? So I was like, all right, that's a bit like reminding me of stories from the Bible, you know, Jesus and healing people. And I was like, I don't know what I think about that. But she was like, let me give you some Reiki, let me give you some healing. And she was using like these crystals. And I was just so interested in what she was doing. And I went to her, she lived in a little bus, like a little, like an old little school minibus sort of thing that she'd converted, right? It was really cool. And so I went to her bus, and she had this really nice like vibe in there. There was like crystals hanging everywhere. She had this nice little bed made up, and she was like, just lie down on there. She put a blanket on. There was this really nice music playing, and she was burning some incense, which smelled really, really nice. It was Nag Champa, actually, I found out. And I've had an obsession with that incense ever since this happened. And she gave me this healing, and I just had this experience where I felt like so much release that it made me cry. And I was crying, and she was talking to me afterwards. And I was such a troubled teenager, you know, I was going through such a hard time. And she talked to me, and she told me it's gonna be all right. You know, your life is gonna be all right, and you can always use healing. You can always heal yourself. And I spent a lot of time with her after that. She didn't stay around for too much longer, but I spent as much time with her as I could. And, you know, I was just soaked up everything that she taught to me about, you know, meditation. Meditate, same as you, meditation was a huge thing, learning to sit and be still. And she taught me about putting my hands on my body and breathing. She said to me, you do yoga, you know how to breathe. Breathe into your heart and learn to love yourself. You have to love yourself. You have to let go of the negative ways that you feel. And I just really looked up to her. So I spent a lot of my time then playing around with that and seeing how I could help myself in times when I was really struggling, when I was feeling really sad and I had no one else to turn to. I mean, I really didn't have anyone to turn to. I spent a
Mm.
lot of time on my own in a cold, damp caravan on the side of the road with no money, no food, no nothing. So I spent a lot of time in a bad situation, but I learned that I could hold myself and give myself a bit of love. And I suppose for me, that was a big help, because there was times when I felt like, it couldn't have got any worse for me.
Yeah.
So these were moments when I really felt like I could connect with something, and I didn't know what it was. I was young, but I felt like through putting my hand on my heart and on my solar plexus and
Doing
breathing,
like a heart hold.
yeah, and just breathing into myself, I could feel this, like, and this probably does sound very woo-woo to someone who hasn't ever experienced anything like this, but I felt like I was wrapped in love,
Yeah.
and it just felt like something was holding on to me and looking after me. And I felt like whenever I was in a bad situation, then I remembered that I could do this, and there was something there looking out for me. And I really felt like I had a connection to a higher presence, a higher being. And I didn't know, was that energy? Was it God? Was it energy? I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was helping me. And I suppose from that, that kind of sparked my interest a little bit more. And then after I had my daughter, I went through, again, this is stories for another podcast, but after I had my daughter, I had a hard time with her. She was premature. We were in hospital for a lot. So we're going on a few years now. I obviously had by then developed a huge obsession with crystals and using crystals for healing. And I was still doing my yoga. I still do my yoga to this day. I swear by it. So I was, using my crystals and using my heart hold meditation, and I started buying a lot of books from, I call them like hippie shops, those really nice little shops you go into that have crystals,
Yeah, yeah.
incense, tarot cards, angel cards, and books. And I've always been a bookworm. Books has always been my thing, so I really started reading a lot of books on just different ways, a lot of books about healing your heart and learning to live. There was one book I read that was learning to live in an ever-changing world with an open heart, and that was a great book for me at the time. It showed me so many different tips and tricks to help my anxiety and help me kind of process a lot of the things that I'd been through, which were, as I said, some pretty horrific things.
Mm.
um and through going to these kind of shops, I started, meeting quite spiritual people. And I got to know a fella that did my Reiki 1 with me. And his Reiki master, a lovely lady called Sam, who also helped me. Um, and I did my Reiki 1, and that was intense. That was something that I'd wanted to do for so, so long. And I detoxed for, like, I went on this big detox thing. I was a smoker at the time, used to drink and what have you at parties and eat a lot of rubbish and, just generally not look after myself. But I went on this huge detox and actually detoxed for nearly a year, did my Reiki level 1, and I felt like the wool had been, or the rug had been pulled out from underneath my feet, and my whole world went topsy-turvy. And it's so hard to explain something like that to somebody who hasn't experienced it. But I was warned before, Reiki 1 is like, it's like going through a huge spiritual awakening, and it feels like the rug has been pulled from under your feet. Like, anything that isn't for your highest good will find a way to leave your life. And
100.
I'm anything. So I mean, friends, house, if your house isn't the right place for you, you can lose your home, your job, your friends. I mean, you can lose a lot. And I really did have a shake-up of my life. I ended up living in a completely different area, lost a lot of friends, the relationship I was in broke down, and I was just like, what's happened here? I've had this huge shake-up. And I carried on with my meditation and my practices, and just had this kind of very slow. It happened over years. I went on to do my Reiki level 2 and then my master's. And over the course of 10 years, actually, that took. So it was similar to you. It was a really long journey from my Reiki level 1, which is all about healing yourself. When you do level 2, you learn how to help heal other people. And then when you do your level 3, you learn how to attune people to Reiki and help them on their journey of self-healing and discovery. So again, I suppose very similar to you, for me, my spiritual journey was a very long time of self-healing and self-discovery. And learning who I was, and learning how things work in the universe, and some people are put in your path for a reason. Like when I did my Reiki 2, my Reiki master, I told you the story the other day, I
Yeah,
literally walked
chills.
into her in the street. I decided that day I was ready to learn how to help heal other people, and I went out of my house to go to a healing center, and I literally walked into the lady that was to become my Reiki 2 guide. And it was incredible how those sorts of things happen. So my spiritual beliefs are probably sound quite vague to some people, but I really do believe in love. And I really do believe that a spiritual journey is a journey to the core of yourself, to learn to love yourself. Because I feel only when you truly know and love yourself are you in a position to be able to do that with other people as well. And it is a lifelong commitment, I think, to yourself, to always strive to, be your best version of yourself. And I think that can come in many different ways. Like for me, it really did start with yoga and breathing and meditation and Reiki. And along the way, I've used crystals and oracle cards and, different tools, sound as well. Like for a lot of people, I think music plays a
Mm,
huge part in a spiritual journey. And I feel that connection now. It's a part of my daily life. Every single day when I'm going out walking, I feel that connection. I'm sometimes overcome, and this probably sounds very cheesy and corny, but I sometimes feel like I'm just overcome with emotion for, the world that we live in, for how the sky looks, or and I'm looking around and I'm like, wow, I can't believe that I actually live in this place. It's just incredible, and I
yeah.
just feel this huge connection to spirit and energy. And I think that's come from a lifetime really of practice, and practicing that, feeling that connection and feeling the energy around me and tuning into it.
And I think, I think that is the thing, isn't it? Like both of our journeys into spirituality were very different, but both of
Yeah,
them come from a place of it's all about self-healing
yeah,
and using and finding tools and ways to combat and come to terms with things that you've been through and things that you're dealing with right now and experiencing and having to process. And even
absolutely.
though, yeah, we both came into spirituality very differently, we've had the same end result. We've both, learned to heal ourselves and love ourselves. And now we're at the point of like, now I want to help other people do it, like I'm trying to get Grace into like meditation and, stuff like that to help with her anxiety around her GCSEs and that kind of stuff, because I know that if she starts it early, then she's really going to benefit in later life.
Yeah, it will be a huge help to her. And I really feel that it is something that would be just incredible to be taught more in schools. Maybe instead of like, obviously I grew up in a school where we learnt religion. It was Church of England, so it was very focused on one thing. But I really believe that learning more how to connect with yourself, and meditation or yoga or things like this would be so beneficial to children growing up. I mean, I just think I'm so blessed really that those things were put into my life from a young age, because of the places I was and the you know how the universe works and puts these things in your path. But man, if I'd had those things in my life from an even younger age, it would have made a huge difference,
Yeah.
because I very quickly fast forwarded through like 20 years of my life while I was talking about that. And if you think like 20 years to get there, even more longer, I mean, I'm in my 40s now, so this is a long time of growth. And I'm not saying it's a process that should be speeded up at all, but I'm just saying that, if these tools that we've learned were available to younger children and were taught more openly, I think it would be a huge benefit to people in general,
And I do, and this is like, it's kind of slightly off topic, so I'll try not to like veer us into of a different direction. But like I'm obviously trying really hard to get this into something that Grace does as a regular practice, and doing things like getting her to practice gratitude and journaling and meditation, because actually being like, she's 16 on Friday, and being 16 in 2024 is rough.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it is hard to be a teenager. I thought it was hard to be a teenager when I was 16, but it is even harder to be a teenager now with,
Yeah.
social media and influencers and all of the world of online life.
Oh,
So,
I do feel for kids growing up these days with all of that. Like, I mean, we had nothing like that.
no,
And it was,
but you know what? I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful that there are no photos of me doing things I shouldn't be doing at 14 years old. I'm so
yeah.
glad about that.
Oh
I'm
my
just
God.
throwing that out there.
You'd never live down half the stuff once it's out there.
I know, and that's it. Like, but that's what makes it so much harder. And I totally agree that I think, schools play a massive thing in, they're consciously aware of the mental health of children. Um, but I do think that they're very aware of it from a medical standpoint. Like, they look at it from what the NHS guidelines are around mental health and children, and how you should look after it and how you should cultivate it. But I think they should be looking at it from all angles, and look at it from a spiritual side as well. Look at it from the self-love and self-care, and, working on your within and that kind of stuff, because I think there'd be a lot of kids that would benefit from that a lot more than they are.
Yeah, me too. I really feel that. And, like when you're at that kind of secondary school age, it's a really hard time of life,
Mm,
especially for things like loving yourself and accepting yourself and learning, about who you are as a person. And I think the more intervention and the more help that you can bring to support somebody's internal growth and, you know passage of that, navigating that whole kind of teenage angst
yeah,
thing, if you bring that in at that kind of age, or even at a younger age, so that by the time you are at that age, it's second nature to, sit yourself down and give yourself 5 minutes meditation in the evening, or whatever the practice is that you want to use, if it's crystal healing or sound healing or breathing or yoga, anything like that. I think it's a really useful tool to learn something.
yeah. No, I completely agree. So yeah, one thing also like to be good to touch on is how spirituality for both of us is kind of the reason why we are here doing what we're doing. Because if it wasn't for our interest in all things to do with crystals and that side of things, we wouldn't know each other, because
Yeah.
we only got to know each other because we both were affiliates for a crystal company, which is mad when you think about it, because we wouldn't even be sat here talking and recording a podcast if we hadn't both decided that we need to affiliate for that company.
Yeah, and it's just like absolute craziness to think of all the millions and billions of people in the world, and of all the, and we don't even live in the same country. Let's
No,
just make that be known as well.
that's true.
So all done through the connection of the internet. Another thing that connects people without, physical thing being seen there. But if it wasn't for that, like internet connection, Facebook, and a crystal company, um, we really wouldn't be here doing this. And it makes you wonder, like, is this is all part of the master plan?
Yeah, I think so. I think, because even though both of us have over the years been part of various different kind of online sales companies, and I know that we have worked within the same companies in the
Yeah,
past, but we only kind of connected properly when we were affiliating with House of Christianity. Like
yeah,
that was the one. That was when we were kind of became on each other's Facebooks and we were talking more regularly. And that's where it stemmed from, because I'm pretty sure we have been in pretty much all of the same companies, if
yeah,
not all of the same at the same time, but just
yeah,
never actually worked with each other until, the crystals brought us together. So
yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah. It just goes to show how I suppose how the universe works as well. And when I feel like when you're really aligned with something and you're on that journey, things do fall into place.
They
And
do.
like you say, the right people are there at the right times. And even like you say, this podcast happening, how it came about was from your dream,
Yeah.
really. I mean, yeah, we were laughing and calling ourselves a podcast, but it was a dream. And what's to say that that dream was not your connection to your spiritual, the divine, or your spirit guides or your guardian angels giving you a direct message into your brain?
Do you know, I am sure of it. I am sure that when I
Yeah,
have dreams like the ones I was having about this podcast were
yeah,
so vivid and so real, and I felt it. Like when I woke up, I could feel like I had done that. You have a lot of, like,
yeah.
everyone has a lot of dreams where you wake up and think, what the hell just happened there? Like that was crazy. Like, or you don't remember them. I have a lot of friends that don't remember their dreams at all. But when I have dreams like this, where they're so vivid and so clear and you can feel it, you
Yeah,
feel like it's happened when you wake up. You have that
yeah,
moment of disorientated of, did I just, am I in my bed? That didn't happen. Okay, that wasn't real. Like,
yeah.
that's when I'm like, yeah, 100% that right there.
And
That
when you
is
told me, I
spirit
literally came up
connecting.
in goosebumps. Like when you said it to me, I got goosebumps all over my body. I was like, whoa, we need to do this. We
Yeah.
really need to do this.
And I like, and then because like I'm obviously I, meditate quite a lot, and a lot of the meditations after that dream were coming through of like images of us like standing on stage talking about a book that we'd written about our podcast. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, it's just I mean, I say, oh, it surprises me still to this day, and I know it shouldn't.
Mm,
I know it shouldn't. And I always say I don't believe in coincidence. I call them synchronicities, and I feel that those are things that happen to show you're on the right path. When
100%.
you start getting a lot of synchronicities, I feel like, yeah, I'm in the right place at the right time here because all these little signs are coming to me. And I just, I don't know why I get surprised by these things, but every time I'm like, oh, wow. I feel surprised, but at the same time, I know the universe is doing what the universe does, and it's,
Yeah.
aligning for me.
Do you know, I'm the same. I still, yeah, to this day, something will happen and I'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And then I'm like, of course you can. Like, this is how it works. This is what
Yeah.
you know is true. Like, but yeah, you just have those moments where it just lines up and you get like, what we've been referring to as spiritual intervention, where you can be like 100% wholeheartedly, I know that that's happened because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
And you
know
just know, and that is I suppose that is your belief, but that's your belief
Mhm.
based on your own experiences that lead you to know that it's not even a belief, it's like a knowing.
Yeah, it is an internal unconscious and conscious knowing,
Yeah.
and you can feel it deep inside you sometimes, like,
Yeah.
and this would be good to kind of lead on to, talking about some moments that we've both had where we've had these really strong like spiritual interventions or spiritual connections, because you do
Yeah.
get that feeling of just absolute 100% wholeheartedly knowing. Um, and like, so I think the biggest one of those moments for me was with Darcy. So
Yeah.
obviously I mentioned, before, my mother-in-law is very connected to that kind of thing. And she again with the dreams, she has very like vivid dreams. She connects to a lot of people in her dreams. And she came to me, having had a dream the night before and said she was visited by a man. He came up to her and said, I've been trying to get in touch with you for ages, and he knew who she was, and she described this man to me. And the minute she described him, I was like, that's my dad. 100% that's my dad. She described his face, the kind of clothes he'd be wearing, the sort of person he was, mannerisms, everything. And like she could never have met my dad because he died when I was
Yeah.
13. And
Yeah.
I didn't meet Ross until I was in my like mid-20s. So
Yeah.
there's no way she could have met him. And I have very little photos of my dad around just for my own like purposes. I have more now.
Yeah.
That's become something we've healed and crossed that bridge. Um, so yeah, she described him to me, and he said to her in this dream, "You need to tell Charlotte I'm sending her a gift." And that was it. That was it. And then she spoke to me, and we were both like puzzled. Couldn't for
Yeah.
the life of me figure out what the hell that was. I was looking at my daily life and thinking, what could it possibly be? We had no idea. We're both completely baffled. And then I think it was potentially the week or maybe 2 weeks after I found out I was pregnant with
Yeah.
Darcy. And bearing in mind,
Yeah.
Darcy is my rainbow baby because
Yeah.
I did miscarry before I had Darcy. So and then that was kind of me thinking, okay, maybe that's what this is. But I wasn't sure because, you never, sometimes and like, but I wasn't sure. I was thinking, could this be, would this be something my dad would send me? I'm not sure. But what 100% of like confirmed it to me was, so during labor, like Ross put on like an acoustic mix playlist on Spotify or something. It was completely random. I think it was like Kenny G or something doing acoustic covers with no words, just the melodies of
Mm.
various songs. And it had been on for hours, like absolute hours, just on shuffle and, keeping the room nice and calm. Well, the minute Darcy entered this world, they hadn't even cut the cord, and the song that comes on is Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On. Now, that was my dad's favorite song
Mm.
and was a song I genuinely could not listen to for years and years and years because it just used to absolutely break me.
Yeah.
And it came on, and in that moment, I was like, that was it. She's my gift. She is what he was sending me. And that was his then another sign from him having that song come on the playlist was to say, this is it. If you didn't know, you do now. Like
Yeah.
she
I'm
was your
here.
gift. And honestly, like that for me just solidified my connection. And I'm sure
Yeah.
that he is one of the spirit guides that follows me around quite a lot. I get a lot of like dad vibes recently. And the fact that your birthday is the same birthday as my dad's is like spooky as
That's
anything, okay?
uncanny. That is uncanny, I have to say. Um, just moments like that just really reaffirm as well, don't they, that maybe we aren't alone.
Mm,
Um, there are people watching over us, and I firmly believe I have guardian angels. And I told you this story the other day
mm.
that I really believe that I am my own guardian angel.
Yes,
Um,
this story.
I
Oh my God.
I do believe that I have a couple more guardian angels, my great granny and my great granddad, but I had I went through a lot of really quite horrific things when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. And honestly, I look back on my life and sometimes I think I cannot believe that I'm alive with
Mm.
what I went through and what I experienced. And some of the levels of even the violence that I experienced was just crazy. And then also the moments of just intense kind of sadness and loneliness, and those times in my life when I felt really, really low. And when I learnt Reiki, when I learnt my Reiki one of the things that we learnt was healing of the self. And through learning my Reiki too, I also learned how to send healing over time and space. So I could send healing back to myself in the past. And I started doing that so regularly whenever I was activated by a memory, or, whenever anything happened and I remembered something I'd been through. I started sending healing back to myself from, a very young age. Even there's one time I remember we had a swing in my back garden when I was a little girl. So this was before things even got bad. And the swing went like down a hill, and the hill was full of stinging nettles. And I went on the swing and fell off at the top and rolled all the way down the
Oh
stinging
my
nettles.
goodness.
And I was about 5, and I just remember my mum covering me in that. Oh, I'm probably going to say this wrong. Calamine, is it? Calamine lotion?
Can
Calamine?
chamomile?
Chamomile, yeah.
Yeah,
The
chamomile.
weird one. I remember her just covering me in that, and I had stings all over me, and I even sent healing back to me then when that happened. Is that because I vividly remember it? I feel like it was a really traumatic thing that happened to me. And then I started sending healing forward to myself as well in the future. And then I was talking to a friend of mine about it. And then I had this like epiphany, this moment where I was like, my God, I'm my own guardian angel. I'm literally the person that is looking out for myself, like through all those hard things. Because I often wondered, how did I make it through this? How did I make it through this without being, seriously hurt or worse? And realizing then that I was the person that was sending me back that healing and that love and that like safety net made me really think, like, what if I am my own guardian angel?
Mm. And you
And
know,
when I thought
ever
that, I just,
ever since you told me that story, I'm convinced that that's the case. The reason you were able to deal with
true.
all of the things that you dealt with and were able to
Mm,
keep pushing through and powering on,
mm,
even though it was so awful, was because you had that feeling like something was being sent to you to help keep you going, even when you didn't think you could. And it was
yeah,
probably you now sending it back.
sending it back. And I use visualization a lot.
Mm,
I'm a very, very visual person. I'm a very kind of creative and arty person, and I really do use visualization to help me feel things and do things. So, especially when I'm meditating or anything like that, visualization is key to me. So, I would really imagine myself like holding myself in those, or protecting or covering me in like golden light and protecting myself. And yeah, I mean, I do really feel like my great granny is always with me, and
yeah.
my granddad. I really, really, really feel that they're always with me. Um, but I still feel like there was times there where it was me that was helping me through it. And I don't know what other people think to that. Like, with, I suppose that's another part of a kind of spiritual viewpoint altogether. Like, do you believe in that sort of more paranormal?
Yeah. I
It
think, because
is, isn't it?
I wholeheartedly do. I think, there is people that we have, lost, that have passed over to the other side, that are still here. And I do think
Yeah,
that there are some people more than others that have stronger connections to these people, but I do think
mm,
everybody is capable of connecting to a loved one if
yeah,
you like try hard enough. And I know that sounds bad, but like if you really, really try and push that connection, I feel like you can get it with
yeah,
people on the other side.
yeah.
Um,
And I really believe energy does not die.
No.
you know, your physical body might, but I refuse to believe even that the energy or the essence that is you
It's like
dies.
your
It
soul has to
changes.
go somewhere,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Your soul,
where does
it
it go?
moves to somewhere.
Mm.
I mean, did they not even do an experiment where they've weighed someone just as they die and there is a difference in weight?
So yeah, and they've also because I like they have done studies, I think, where they weighed people before and after. Um,
Mm,
and you could see the kind of like difference in weight is that they weigh less obviously after because the soul has kind of come out
it's
of the
less.
body. But I
Yeah.
also think, and feel free, there may well be somebody that is gonna tell me that everything in this episode of Breaking Bad was absolute crap. But there was an episode of Breaking Bad where they did work out the percentages of the human body, and it worked
Yeah.
out to 99.9%. So,
Wow.
and the theory was that the point percentage that's left is the soul. It's not a physical thing. It's not, an atom. It's not a cell. It's not, anything because it
Not
wasn't
something
something
that
they
can
could
be measured.
physically measure and write down. So, and that
Yeah.
to me, that makes me think there has to be something there. And I'm pretty confident if my stepdad is ever going to listen to this podcast, he will message me and tell me that I'm crazy because he is a physicist and will be like, no, Charlotte,
But
behave
he,
yourself.
no, that's where I disagree. He cannot call you crazy because if he is a physicist and if he is a scientist, he has to be open to the fact that we don't know everything.
Mm.
And just because we can't prove it now doesn't mean that in
Doesn't mean
a
it doesn't
100 years'
exist.
time, exactly. I mean, a long time ago, we didn't know what gravity was even. So people have to think outside the box and have to be open to these ideas that there is more, so much more to this life than what we can see and measure at the moment.
Yeah, well, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like I'm very much I believe that there is a lot more that you can't physically see and touch.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
is a lot to do with feeling and intuition. And, when you get these kind of thoughts in your head that don't sound like you in your head, that's
Yeah.
like that to me, that's me saying, right, that's spirit or energy connecting to me in some way. Like
Yeah.
when you do journaling and all of a sudden the words coming out don't really feel like something you would say to yourself.
Yeah.
That for me is definitely somebody channeling through you to tell you something.
Absolutely. And, you know, I really, really feel this and believe this as well. Like feelings are such a strong part of who we are
Yeah.
that there has to be more than, you know, these like the feelings, like when we talk about ego-based feelings and negative feelings compared to love and living in your heart space.
Mm.
There's something to be said about why we get those feelings and why we have that intuition and why we feel certain ways about certain things. Like there's things there that we cannot see or measure that make you feel a certain way. Sometimes when you get anxious for no reason, if you're around certain people, or sometimes you might feel sad when you're around certain people
Mm.
because you're picking up on that. And I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, when you say like, oh, I've got butterflies in my stomach.
Yeah.
These kind of things don't happen for no reason. Otherwise, we wouldn't experience them
You
as
wouldn't have them. Yeah.
humans.
You
Yeah,
wouldn't experience it. And like, because and something that, I've learned over the years, when it's been come to kind of trying to manage my own mental health is trusting my own inner knowing of things.
yeah,
Because a
yeah,
lot of the time I used to think, oh, this inner knowing, nope, that's my mental health talking, that's my paranoia, that's my anxiety. But now I've
yeah,
been able to kind of figure out a way of what is my inner knowing and what is my bipolar brain. Like,
yeah.
it's that side. And like, but for me, the inner knowing is something you can't dispute it. You just know, you know,
You
you,
know, yeah,
you you get these feelings from people and places and all of this kind of stuff. Like, you know, I'm sure we could literally talk about this for ages and ages of how you feel around certain people and places give you these different
Yeah,
feelings. Like I remember Grace went to Berlin last year, so they went to a concentration camp. Well, it was a prisoner
yeah,
of war camp.
yeah,
And they went to the kind of like, into the camp, into the like, I don't know what the politically correct way to call it is. Like, I want to call it like the death chambers, like where they would go
yeah.
be
The
tested
bad.
on or executed. And even
Yeah,
Grace was saying, like, the room was heavy. Like, it was
yeah,
a heavy feeling, like, the energy was really heavy. And
yeah,
I do think that people and places give off their own vibration and energy, and your
yeah,
inner intuition or inner knowing, whatever you want to call it, is what tells you
yeah.
that feeling. And
Absolutely.
it perks up or perks down depending on, what you're receiving from other people.
Yeah. It took me a long time to realize that I was very empathic anyway.
Mm,
And a lot of the things that I used to feel weren't actually coming from me. It was picking up on those kind of vibes from other people, especially when I used to feel very anxious in, big crowds of people. And I realized that I was picking up energy from other people around me, and it wasn't actually my anxiety that was kicking in those places. And I learned how to, kind of shield my energy from that energy of other people. And that became a really powerful thing once I learned that, because it really helped me massively, change who I was as a person from feeling insecure a lot of the time and anxious to realizing that, actually I'm just really picking up a lot of energy from other people and places.
mm,
And once I protected myself from that, life changed a lot for me, and it became
yeah.
a lot easier to handle.
Yeah, no, I think I'm the same. Like I very much pick up on other people's energy and, feeling, and that kind of, yeah, does leave me feeling a bit drained sometimes.
And yeah, it really can. It can really take it out of you. It can just leave you feeling a little bit exhausted and unsure. I think, when you're, especially for me when I was younger and I wasn't so sure of who I was as a person, it could leave me feeling really unsure of myself and really uncertain, which isn't a very nice way to be feeling. So it is, and I think that brings us nicely to something that we wanted to talk about as well, which was our daily practices and what
Yeah.
we do. And kind of a nice way to, finish up, I suppose, is to talk about things that we've learned that have helped us.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, so for me, I'm pretty sure if anyone's got to the end of this podcast, they will know that for me, I'm 100% going to say daily practices for me is meditation.
Yeah,
Without fail, I will meditate, whether it be actually kind of sitting in meditation or whether it's a guided sleep meditation. If, if it's a case of I get into bed and I'm absolutely exhausted, guided sleep
yeah,
meditation all the way, because then I can still kind of tap into that place, but in a nicer way. But for me, meditation and journaling are two daily practices that I do basically without fail.
yeah,
Because it's like journaling for me is a bit of a brain dump at the end of the day. So it is good to journal about your day, get everything out there, talk to yourself a little bit. I get the best responses when I talk to myself. So
I talk to myself a lot.
yeah, you get the best answers, you get the
Yeah,
best answers. But yeah, that's one thing I do a lot. And with journaling, I do always kind of finish my journaling with listing things I'm grateful for that day.
yeah, yeah,
So, and I do a lot of that in my meditation as well. Like gratitude has played a huge part in daily practices.
yeah.
So yeah, for me, that would be my two biggest kind of daily
You
things.
must do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, the whole gratitude thing is a huge part of my life as well. The attitude of gratitude. the law of attraction, that's something we could probably do a whole another podcast on.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, for me, focusing my mind each morning on all the things I'm grateful for in my life really helps me start each day in a great way. And at the end of the day, I love to give myself the same. Again, if you listened at the beginning, the trick that I learned all those years ago, one hand on my heart, one hand on my solar plexus. And I just like to sit and breathe good energy in and blow out bad energy. And again, I'm very visual. So I will imagine breathing in golden light right down into my toes and then blowing out like a black smoke, which is my negative feelings and the bad things that I feel have happened to me. Um, those are things I do every day without fail. And one more thing for me, which is a huge, huge help just for my own mind state and my mindset, and really helps me massively, is movement,
Yeah.
breathing and moving. So my yoga practices really beneficial to me. Stretching and breathing, I just find, again, maybe it's because it's what I started off with, but it's also maybe because I am kind of a fidgety person and I do fidget a lot. So for me, moving is always really good. And walking, just zoning out while I'm walking, or my yoga practices. So it's kind of like a meditation, I suppose, as well, but it's a meditation that I can kind of focus on.
Mm.
Like with the yoga, it's focusing on the movement and the breath at the same time. Like if I'm
Yeah.
walking, it's the same. It's the steps, the rhythmic, and the breathing at the same time. I've just found that those things very, very beneficial in my life.
Yeah. I do think one other thing that's just kind of come to my head, it's something I probably should do on a daily basis, but I tend to kind of turn to it more when I need the reassurance, or I need to kind of pull myself out of, I've had bad news, or I've got a lot of anxiety, a lot of stresses, and it's just doing affirmations.
Oh
That
yeah.
was something that
Yeah.
I started doing when I read The Secret, and it's, spoke about speaking things into existence.
Yeah.
And so affirmations is something that I probably should do more often, but it is definitely
Yeah.
something I call on when I really need help, and I need to kind of pull my mind out of wherever my mind is.
Yeah.
Affirmations really help with that.
Yeah, they do. And like with the whole kind of law of attraction and the gratitude thing, I don't just write down things that I'm grateful for. I kind of sit with it and really feel it, and
Yeah.
like when I think about the kids and my husband or whatever, and I think, yeah, and I really feel that, like, that love and that happiness that they're in my life, because the universe is something that you have to remember, is the universe responds to a vibration, and a vibration isn't just words, it's the feeling and the energy that you're putting out all the time.
Yeah.
So it's the more you focus on those positives that you've got, the more you feel the positives from that. And it's not so easy to learn to do. It's really hard sometimes to find something to be grateful for, even in your life,
Mm.
if you're going through a hard time. But I always used to think, like, in those moments, I'd think that I was grateful that I had a mind that I could think with.
Yeah. Sometimes
If it
you have to go like
right back
you
to the
know,
basic.
yeah, like, and I was the same, like back at the beginning when I first started kind of, trying to pull myself out of things, I didn't have a whole lot to be grateful for.
Yeah,
I had made some colossal mistakes that had
yeah,
ended me up in a, mother and baby hostel without my baby.
yeah.
I had alienated a lot of my friends, a lot of my family. I was very alone. So I didn't actually have a whole hell of a lot to be grateful for. So sometimes it is a lot harder, but that
Sometimes
is
you have to dig
definitely,
deep.
yeah, you do.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the more you do it, the better it helps. And I always say, what you pay attention to, you become aware of. And it's such a like I know a lot of people know that saying and they've heard it before. It's like, if you suddenly buy a new car, you start seeing loads of that same car everywhere. When you get pregnant, suddenly you see pregnant women everywhere. And it's not that those cars and those women weren't there before, it's just that you weren't paying attention to it.
Mm,
And when you think about that in like the context of your life and what it can do for your life, when you start paying attention to the right things, you become more aware of those things, and in turn, your life becomes better for
yes.
it if you're thinking and paying attention to the right things. So it's always good to be very mindful of where your thoughts are going.
And I do think, your thoughts are a lot more powerful than people think. You
Yeah.
know, what you are thinking about, you will bring into your life. And one thing
Yeah.
that I learned from The Secret, that as soon as I read it, I was like, how dare you? Like, was that, the life you're living now is a result of the thoughts you thought in the past. And I
Yeah.
sat there and I thought, how dare you? How dare you tell me
Mm.
that I did this? How dare you?
Yeah.
But it's true. Your
Yeah.
thoughts are so incredibly powerful. And I think that's
Your
why
thoughts
it's
become
so
things.
important. This positive mental attitude isn't just like a tagline, it's actually something that can really change your life.
It is a way of life, and I do think it's very spiritual.
I do. I
I
do.
really do. Yeah, I really, really do.
But
I like that. It's not just a tagline.
I think this has been such a fun podcast to record. I'm like so
Oh, I
glad we
really
did
enjoyed
it.
it.
I'm
And
so glad we did it.
my brain is just firing about so many things that we can talk about from this as well.
Yeah, same. I've literally been like, mentally post-it noting the whole walls of my
Yeah,
head of all of the
yeah,
things that we'd be like, oh, we can talk about that now, and we can talk about that, and we can branch into that.
yeah.
So I've had great fun recording this today.
Me too. I'm so glad that we did it. It was definitely the right topic to start off our podcast
Yes.
series with, and I just really enjoyed talking to you about everything, and more insights into each other's lives as well. And I really would love to hear from other people if they have
Yeah.
any stories on their spiritual beliefs or their journeys or what they even think spirituality might be. I would love to discuss.
Yes, I'd love to know where everybody else sits on it and how everybody else feels about it, and whether anything that we've said kind of resonates with you, or if anything we've said has been a bit eye-opening, of being like, actually,
Yeah,
okay, all right, hang
yeah.
on a minute, has it kind of got the thoughts flowing in a direction
The
that
brain
might not
juices
have been.
bubbling.
Yeah, the brain juice is bubbling. So yeah, no, it's been loads and loads of fun. So I'm really glad that we got to do this as the first one.
Yes, and I'm really excited to do the next one already again
Yeah,
as well.
I don't even know what the topic is yet, but I'm so excited about it.
My brain is firing of so many different things. I actually wrote down a good few things while we were talking, like, oh, we need to delve into that.
Oh, I love that. I can't wait for our next brainstorming session.
Well, we,
Yeah, we will wrap this up. But thank you everybody that has listened. We really appreciate it. And yeah,
yeah,
drop comments and questions and let us know what you thought, and what you want to hear more about, and if any of this was kind of resonates with you.